This presentation was prepared for the Great Lakes PTTC under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. The opinions expressed in this webinar are the views of the speakers and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services. The PTTC believes that words matter and uses affirming language in all activities. Got a few housekeeping items for you. If you have technical issues, please individually message me, Rebecca Buller, in the chat section at the bottom of your screen, and we will be happy to assist you. If captions or live transcript would be helpful, please use your Zoom toolbar near the bottom of your screen to enable by going into the More section, select Captions, and Show Captions. If you have questions for the speaker, please put those in the Q&A section also at the bottom of your screen. You will be directed to a short survey link after this session, and we would appreciate it if you could fill it out. It takes about 3 minutes, and it helps us improve the offerings that we have and report to our funders. Certificates of attendance will be sent out via email to all who attend this webinar in full, and it can take up to 2 weeks to receive those certificates. If you'd like to know more about what we're doing or information on upcoming events, please see our social media pages. And now I'd like to introduce our presenters. Erin Ficker serves as a prevention manager for the Great Lakes PTTC. For more than 16 years, Erin has worked in substance abuse prevention, supporting communities to use evidence-based strategies and data-driven processes in substance abuse prevention planning and implementation. She works with community-level prevention practitioners and schools in the development, implementation, evaluation, and sustainability of prevention interventions. Michelle Majors is a senior prevention specialist with over 18 years in the field and lives in South Dakota. She is an experienced trainer in substance misuse prevention, suicide prevention, and mental health promotion. Michelle is trained to deliver several evidence-based prevention programs. She brings extensive experience as a trainer and technical assistance provider. Michelle holds a Bachelor of Science degree in sociology with an emphasis on social work and human resources from South Dakota State University. She is also a certified prevention specialist. I'm going to stop my sharing and turn things over to Michelle and Erin.
Being here. Oops, hi. And thanks everyone for being here. Rebecca, thank you for the very nice introduction. Some of you are already doing this, and thank you. It's really exciting to see that. That you're entering into the chat your organization and your location, which is wonderful. Thank you so much for taking that minute to do that. And I'm seeing people from all over the country. So thank you so much. We do ask that you also add in the number of years you've been in prevention, so we can see that. So like you heard, Michelle and I actually both have similar amount of time in the field. I've been in the field for about 18 years. Michelle similarly, I believe. So it looks like we have people from 22 years and 30, maybe, is that right? 15, 4 brand new. So it's really wonderful to see this wide range of people. We will be you will be able to chat, as you can already tell, but we also have a Q&A section, and we ask that you use that to ask questions, and we'll be monitoring that throughout. We'll answer questions at the end unless they are kind of relevant to exactly where we are, and we can jump right in and answer that. Otherwise, we will wait to the end to address those. If you ask a question in the chat, it's quite likely that it'll go by so fast we won't be able to see it. So I do ask that you use that Q&A. And I just see so many years passing over through the chat. So exciting to see that. Okay. So today, our learning objectives to focus on best practices and coalitions. Is really, sorry, I'm Our learning objectives are to kind of define and create some level setting around what we mean by coalitions, describe why coalitions are essential to work in prevention. We're going to then really turn into some research-based best practices for coalitions, and we'll talk, most of our time we'll be spending on the best practices for coalition, and important and essential to those best practices are the importance of having a diverse coalition that represents your community population. So those are going to be what we're going to move through in our objectives today. And when we think about coalitions and we think about communities, we know that some communities allow the future to happen and things roll over and onto them, whereas successful communities decide the future is something they create, and coalitions are part of what we do to create that future. So when we think about coalitions, we think about a diverse group of people and organizations. I have a chat in front of me, I apologize. When we think about coalitions, we think about a diverse group of people, organizations, and community leaders that have come together to achieve that common goal. And they are truly essential to our work in prevention. And I'm going to turn over to Michelle to tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you all here today. I love talking about coalition work, so excited to be here. And as Erin was saying, we saw people from, it looked like 1 month, 4 months, all the way up to 25 years. So great to have you all here. I hope for those of you that have been doing this for quite a few years can add in the chat some of your thoughts and expertise, maybe take away as a good reminder, maybe a couple of nuggets for those of you that are new. Hopefully you can take away some tools that will help you either get started as you start your journey with coalition work or help build a coalition. So before we dive into why start a coalition, so we looked at this basic definition of what a coalition, why start a coalition, wondering if anyone would be willing to put into the chat, why do we start coalition? Why is it important to have a coalition when we're doing prevention work? So for some of you, that might be you've been doing this for years. And for others, that might be you're just looking to start one up. Why are you considering starting a coalition? What do you see the benefits to that? So we'll just take a look at a couple of, if anyone's putting any comments in there about that.
Community engagement and ownership,
Great.
collaboration with other nonprofits, systems change. You can't do it alone. Great one. Something happened in the community and looking to change behaviors, build trust in the community. This is going by so fast. We have lots of responses. People are stronger together, meet community needs and combine resources. Thank you all for taking that minute. It looks like we've got a lot of great responses.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really, you hit on a lot of the importance of why we do start a coalition, right? So that first one, creating long-term permanent social change. Someone said we can't do this alone. And if we want our work to be sustainable, if we really want to see outcomes that are going to last within our community, we know that by starting a coalition with a group of folks that want to make changes within their community is going to be important. People also talk about the urgent issue. So in your community, it might be, I've seen coalitions start because of an unfortunate loss of young people to drinking and driving accidents or overdose deaths, or maybe we're seeing an increase in suicides within our community. So it's a group of people within a community saying there's an urgent issue that we want to do something about. We also want to influence that future of our community, and by being able to come together as a group of people, both private and public sectors, come together to really create a good future for our communities. Some of us might be doing this work because we really want to make change for those young people in our communities. We want to set up a future that's going to look bright for them. And oftentimes we can see in communities that we might all have, there might be several organizations and several people within the community that want to make change, but they're maybe not communicating. And it might just because they haven't had the opportunity or there's been turf issues. And so really being able to communicate, increase that communication among groups is so very important. I see Lisa Goodwin has her hand raised. Is there a question? And I don't know if we can, I'm not sure that we have the ability to take them off mute if they raise their hand.
If she could please put that in the Q&A, that would be great.
Okay. Thanks, Lisa. If you want to pop that into the chat, we'll either address it now if it's something that you have a question for right now, or we can definitely address it at the end as well, but would love to hear from you. We also start a coalition to plan and launch community-wide initiatives. So again, if we see that there's an urgent issue in our community, but maybe we're just wanting to, in our communities, push an initiative forward. Maybe we're looking to increase policies within our community, or we want to, maybe the policies exist in our community, but people don't know they exist or they're not being enforced. So we want to come together as a group to make sure that this is a community-wide initiative that we're pushing forward. Benefits of working as a coalition. We know that being able to come together as a coalition, oftentimes when we're talking about coalition work with prevention, we have limited resources, limited dollars, and we can't do this work alone. So being able to come together as a coalition and pool those resources and those different ideas that we all bring to the table, we can really make change. And we want to make sure that we're not duplicating services. Sometimes we see, that silos work, right? Where we have a lot of people doing the same thing. We maybe don't know these other organizations are doing the same work as we are. And because we have limited resources, we want to make sure we're not duplicating the resources, but we're coming together to address the issue in our community together. And our voice is going to be heard louder if we're not doing this alone, right? So one person can make change within a community, but really, if we can come together as a coalition and have several voices throughout several sectors wanting to make change within their community, we're going to see probably quicker change and have more influence in that area. Sometimes you have one organization that wants to address, let's say, substance misuse within their community. But if we can get several organizations coming together with this common goal, this common vision, again, we can really move the needle within our community. As we know, for some of you who have done coalition for many years, and maybe for those of you that are just starting a coalition, there can be some barriers when we're trying to build a successful coalition. Now, these barriers shouldn't, stop us from wanting to continue our coalition or get involved in coalition work, but rather it's just important for us to recognize that this might be a barrier and talk about how do we overcome these barriers, and just be aware that these are issues that could come up and we need to be able to be ready to address those, right? So one, it might be insufficient links to the community. So maybe we just don't, I always say coalition leaders, for those coalition leaders that are with us today, I feel like people really underestimate the wonderful work that coalition leaders do and do not value the work of a coalition leader as much as we should. It really takes a special person that wants to go out and rub elbows, and really connect with people within their community. And if we don't have the right links to the people in the community, that might be a barrier. So it's finding those people that have been those champions within your community that can come alongside you to start this process. You might not have the capacity. You want to make change. You're seeing things happening in your community and you're very concerned about it and you want to make change, but you alone do not have that capacity to do it as one organization. So maybe it's a couple organizations coming together and sharing in that capacity to be able to form this coalition and really get it going, because you don't have a full-time position to give to it. So maybe it's a couple, 2, 3 people that might lead this coalition. If you're having a hard time developing the structure or the leadership of a coalition, again, it's really important to find someone who has those leadership skills. So if it's not you, but you want to make change, finding somebody within your community that can really take that leadership role. For many of you who have done prevention for years, we know that change doesn't happen overnight. And sometimes that can really be hard for folks. We want to see change happen immediately, especially if it's something that's impacting, personally. If I just lost a child, or we're seeing a lot of students underage drinking and we're very concerned about, we want to see change right away. And so sometimes people can come to coalitions feeling like things aren't happening as quickly as they should. And so I think it's really important to knowing that mission and vision, and letting coalitions know that sometimes this isn't going to happen overnight, but us all coming together to work on a common goal, we could see it more quickly than if we were doing it alone. And I'm sure a lot of you have experienced turf issues. I've seen where there's been a coalition in a community, another one starts up, and who gets the credit? And at the end of the day, we really want to put those turf issues aside and say, we're here to make change within our community. We're here to build a better future. And so just really being able to talk that out. So these are some common barriers, but just know that this isn't a reason not to build your coalition or start one. Just important to be aware of those. So why is coalition work important to prevention? As Erin said, I've been in prevention for quite a few years, and I really saw coalition work really start to build close to 20 years ago when SPIF-SIG came out, the Strategic Prevention Framework State Incentive Grant. They really rolled out funds to community coalitions. And what we saw was coalitions were able to assess their community, use that SPIF process of assessing their community, figure out what's really going on in their community and what risk factors are driving that, and really come together as a group to address that. And we know that bringing a group of people, a group of organizations together to address this is going to be beneficial when we're talking about prevention work. And so some of the positive impacts that we see with coalitions support the implementation of prevention strategies. Love to see that we see that strengthening collaboration between public and private sectors, bringing everybody to the table to want to make change. Being able to address those environmental and protective factors. So some of the environmental risk factors you might be seeing in your community is social norms or community social norms, accepting the use of underage drinking, for example. And so maybe you're looking at policies that address that within your communities, so you're able to promote those environmental changes within your community as well. And we'll talk more about those risk factors and those environmental strategies that you can do as a coalition. So just a little bit more about that, how coalitions support the implementation of prevention strategies. So sometimes coalitions are the direct service. You might be the folks, so let's say your community wants to do Too Good for Drugs or life skills within a school. As a coalition, you might be that direct service that's going in and providing those services for the school. You may also be the group that's training the school staff to then have the capacity to do that within their school as well. You're also being able to address, those environmental factors within your community when you bring in different key sectors. So maybe you're addressing in your community retail access. Kids are getting a lot of alcohol from retail establishments. And so we're going to work with law enforcement to be able to make sure we're getting in there and doing those compliance checks. We're going to work with those liquor establishments to make sure that they're not providing alcohol to minors. We might be doing the tips training, so they're trained and not to provide alcohol to minors, all those sort of things. As a coalition, we can help monitor the fidelity of those programs and the efficiency. So are we implementing the best practices within our community? Are they evidence-based? And are we seeing the change we want to see in our community? And so they might not have the capacity or the time or the tools to do that. So for us to be able to come in and monitor it and make sure that what we're delivering within our community is making a change is so very important. And we can be an advocate for policy change within the community. And again, one voice can make change, but if we come together as a coalition, we can really make change when it comes to policy. And the great thing about policy work is that it's sustainable. Those outcomes typically are sustainable, maybe long beyond maybe even the life of our coalition. So if we can get policies in place, making sure they're being enforced and people know about them, we can really start to see change and influence our community. So I want to take a second just to talk to you about your experience. And just again in the chat, if you would just think of a time when you were a member of a group, any group, it could be a book club, it could be a, an optimist club, whatever it might be. But what did you like about that group experience? Maybe what was difficult about it, and why are you still in that group today? What are some things about that group that keeps you coming back to it?
Michelle, it's such a great question that kind of grounds us in this. And when I think of this, as always, we wait for folks to write in the chat some of those things. I always think about, I serve as a member of a board of directors for a local preschool. And I love being a part of that group. I just love it. And for some of the same reasons that people are writing in the chat here, they have a passion for working with the youth or being with like-minded people. I felt like my time was always being used well, and still is. I feel like we have the support and the engagement and the what we need to do our work that's provided to us, which is helpful. As others are go ahead and writing in the chat what it is that keeps them there. Different people coming together for one common goal. That's great. Socializing about common goals, time consuming and tired after a long day, right? Yeah, it's so hard to sustain that level of engagement. So relationships.
Nicole even said, maybe a difficulty was not being on the same page, but
Oh,
also there was
yeah.
positive energy there.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah, so I think it's important as Erin moves into best practices with coalition work that we think about what kept us coming to those groups. And that's what we want to remember when we're thinking about our coalitions and sustaining our coalitions. What's going to keep people coming back? As Erin said, I felt like I was valued. There was purpose for me being there. We were seeing change, whatever it might be. Those are the same reasons people are going to keep coming back to your coalitions as well.
Absolutely, those are great. And there was even an example involving a roller derby team. So thanks for sharing. Feeling a sense of belonging is another one that I really love to hear. And one of the things that as a difficulty is to manage all the players and keep them moving forward, right? As a leader, that's really difficult. And as a member, if things aren't moving forward, it can be really hard. So, making difficult decisions and being part of a group that might be public or even a private group, if you're in a book club and you're not able to make decisions about what book to read next. It can be really frustrating and can actually drive people out of the group. So I am still on the board of directors for the preschool, but I've definitely limited my participation for a number of reasons, including our decisions were questioned by the community, and that was really hard. So, and that might be something that we see in our community coalition work. So I'm going to move forward onto coalition best practices. And this is where we're really going to dive into what is it that the research and our experience tells us that is essential to running a successful coalition and a group that keeps people coming back, that creates good prevention and supports our work moving forward and sustains it into the future. It's really about positioning your coalition and your community for success. So we think about values, structure, membership, and leadership. And I think some of these were already touched on in those reasons why people stayed or were engaged. They shared the same interests. They were well supported. They liked being in a group of different people, as we heard from some leaders about moving the group forward or the difficulty with that. So we're going to touch on all of these. Additionally, we are going to touch on sustainability. And we'll kind of do that throughout because sustainability really does touch every part of this work, and everything we do leads to long-term sustainability of our work. So you'll see that I want to just illustrate that sustainability does cross all of these best practice areas, and that it is something that we should always be thinking of. And I think we know from our experience in implementation, if we've done implementation, that fidelity to a model, using best practices are some of the best ways to ensure sustainability of our programs into the future. So look for us to chat about that as we go along. I want to start with the values. And we talk about values when we talk about vision, mission, and what are the shared values of the group. This is important for any number of reasons, but in large part so that, and someone mentioned that you feel like you're a part of something. You feel like you are connected to a mission, you're connected to a passion. And so we're going to dive into that, this area of best practice of values. There we go. The values, we want to think about a vision statement, and you may have heard about what a vision statement is, and we think about it's really that expressed desire. What do we want to see the future conditions be? So our vision may be a vision of a healthy community where youth and adults are safe and healthy. It also motivates and inspires community action. So if that vision statement is out there, it motivates the group, it inspires us to do work that may seem hard or that may be difficult, but it is going to help motivate us and inspire us towards that ultimate vision that's in the future. That vision statement also is gives us the opportunity, if we have a written statement and not just this idea in our head. So sometimes we're like, yeah, everybody gets what we're doing, but a written mission statement that's clear really does help to have shared understanding by members of the community, by members of the coalition, by potential partners, existing partners. So again, it's written. It's not just like in my mind, I know where I'm headed, or I think everybody's on the same page. It really ensures that long-term desired goal is shared, and that everyone involved coming in who's currently a part of that coalition has that same understanding. And it's shared by a diverse community. So it's a broad, often the vision statement's almost always broad because it's really like, what do I want the future to look like, right? So it tends to be more broad than our mission statements and our shared values that we document, but really reflects what we want for our communities and how the work does, and so that it's shared by that diverse group of folks in the community, and is reflective of what we want for the community as a whole. And your vision statement should be fairly easy to communicate, right? We want healthy youth, safe youth. We want a community where our members of the community are healthy and safe and have the resources they need. So those are some of the things that we might think about, really easy to communicate. And I think that's important sometimes, especially in the work we do as, we forget that not everybody knows what we do, right? So I know some of us get asked, well, what do you do for work? And it's hard to sometimes explain substance misuse prevention to people. So it's important for us to stop, take that minute and write that vision statement down. So it really is that expressed desire for where we want to go, and that it's shared, I think, are the two most important things. Maybe three, I'll throw in written. Right. So it also should be written and documented, not just, again, kind of in our own minds. If I can advance slides. Wonderful. So our mission statement is a little bit more specific. It talks about kind of that, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. The mission statement talks about what our vision is, but it also kind of builds on that to talk about what we want to accomplish and how we plan on doing that, right? So we want to have a healthy community. We want to have safe youth. We're going to do that through the work of preventing substance misuse and addressing risk factors related to substance misuse among youth or within the community. So this really gets us to kind of what we plan on doing to accomplish this goal, right? So we want to accomplish building a community where free of substance misuse, or where overdose is we want to reduce overdose and keep people safe. And how we're going to do that, we're going to We want to accomplish our goal by addressing issues related to harm reduction or related to, excuse me, often they're harm reduction related to the prevention of overdose. So we're going to prevent overdose and keep people safe. And then who will benefit, right? So you already heard me kind of say like youth or the community or parents, and we kind of want to put in that statement what we're going to do, what we want to accomplish, how we're going to get there, and why it's important, who it's important. Again, this is maybe a bigger statement than that vision statement we talked about. It's really more specific about how we're going to do that. So we may have a coalition that's focused on substance misuse and suicide. And so we might say we're going to, reduce risk factors related to those. We're going to address the reasons and the causes of suicidality, suicide ideation among youth. Those kinds of things is where we're kind of going, right? So we really want to think about how we're going to get there, what we want to accomplish. I think it's important to also clarify who's involved and who's going to benefit. So that's that real much more specific mission statement. So now we know where do we want to go in the long term and what we need to do to accomplish that, right? So how are we going to get there? In order to do this, we do have to be on the same page, right? And I think it's really important when we think about values. So our vision is that value on that healthy community. Our mission is the value we have around keeping youth safe through a reduction in substance misuse. So it's kind of, you start to shape the values. But when we think about coalition, and we think about the work that they do together, members and partners do together, core values are those things that are documented, communicated, and revisited. They are the values that we share. What is it about our coalition and the reasons we're here that are important? We value a safe community. We value healthy youth. We value collaboration. We value commitment. These values are something that need to be shared by all members. So if you're starting a coalition, it's something you want to get on paper as a group, identify what those values are, and have everyone have that buy-in and contribution. If you have a longstanding coalition that has a commitment to and a defined core values, anytime you're recruiting someone or bringing someone in, you want to make sure that that's communicated and they're in agreement with that for the most part. These are also things that for sustainability reasons, you're going to want to make sure you revisit, right? You want to make sure that you're not just defining that 15 years ago and letting it sit, right? These are dynamic documents, the vision, the mission, as well as this documented and defined core values that you share. These values should also guide your decision-making and your actions. So like I said before, one of the things we might value is collaboration. It might be diversity. So we're ensuring that our decision-making has a shared power dynamic, that there's clear collaboration within those, in those values. Right. So we value communication, we value collaboration, we value sharing of power. So all these things, right, that we start to see that we put in here are going to define future best practices and ensure that we're able to continue this work. We also want to make sure that these values reflect our community, right? So that the values of the coalition are in line with the values that our community shares. So it's important. And one of the other reasons why bringing in a diverse population, or excuse me, a diverse group of folks from your community really does help you make sure that you are reflecting those community values. And it's not just a few of you in a room who decide what those things are, but really a full and diverse group. Again, one of the reasons why you want to continue to update these as your coalition grows and changes, as they are dynamic organizations. And then it really does provide this direction, right? So your goals provide a direction for where you're going. It provides some objectives that really helps you move the work forward. So that's kind of this concept, right, of the values that make up a coalition. I want to make sure I didn't accidentally advance slides, which I tend to do. So this is the foundation, right? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? who are we and how are we going to do this together? What are the values we hold together? This is foundational. If you have a longstanding coalition, this is foundational, and hopefully you have it and you are revisiting it. If you don't have these things, there's no need to panic, right? This is something you can always go back and do. It's something that at any point in time you can either revisit or you can create and you can document. I want to be clear about that piece about documentation. Values, mission, and vision should always be written down. You should have an ability to communicate that either in writing to partners through some sort of a case statement or flyer, or an ability to have a one-pager or a website that talks about those things, but also internally with that coalition, that these are all shared and documented so that people can kind of go back to them as a touch point. There's our foundation. So if we're thinking about, right, we're building a house, we have a foundation and now we need a framework, right? We need a structure. And this may seem kind of, in the weeds is the wrong term, but it might seem, the structure might seem kind of boring or dry, or how could this be one of the most important values or one of the most important best practices? But I'll tell you, it's one of the things that we know keeps people engaged in groups. So when we think about structure, we think about those three things. We think about we think about governance. We think about processes, and the roles and responsibilities of the group. So the first thing is really governance, and it may again seem like a really nitpicky, small, processy thing that's hard to get people to stop and buy into. But without these clear roles and responsibilities, it's hard to keep people engaged. If you don't know what your role is, if you don't know what is expected of you, if it's not clear who's going to do what piece of what work, right? Those things then fall through the cracks. The work doesn't get done. Individuals don't feel valued. They don't feel like there's a clear line of communication and there's clear understanding. This is, again, something that you really want documented. What are the roles and responsibilities of general members? What are the roles and responsibilities of leaders or leaders of subcommittees? What's the role of the subcommittee and their responsibilities? So there's always different ways that we define those roles and responsibilities. And it's exceptionally clear. It's clear. It's exceptionally important that you are clear. We also want to have defined, agreed upon decision-making processes. If you don't, your members are going to start to question why they may not be involved, or why certain people are involved in decision-making, or not even know how they're made. Decision-making is power, and power should be shared. Or at least communicated. There are different ways that decisions are made in different circumstances. There are times when unilateral decisions need to be made. A leader needs to say, this is how we're going to decide this because this is a fast-moving train. Or there are times when the leader might get input and then make a decision. But really what we strive for is getting closer and closer up that kind of chain of different ways that we interact in decision-making, closer to collaboration and consensus. But laying out how and when those different styles of decision-making will be made is essential. And also asking people, do you feel like if we are going to decide on what we're going to eat, does that at the next meeting, does that need to be collaborative? Does that need to be consensus? If we're going to decide on a grant that we're going to write for, is that something that can be made in a unilateral way? As a leader, can I just get the input? So there's all different kinds of ways. It just needs to be defined. So you think of, as a group, when you're thinking about all the ways that you work together, and if you have a value on consensus, then you may really lean heavily towards that consensus model. If you have values around using people's time well and engaging in meaningful ways, it may be that some of those decisions are actually decided by the group, that they're made through some input and someone else makes the decision. That they don't have the time or the commitment to engage in that kind of consensus building. So it's defined. If it's defined, there's no questions, right? There's no one saying, why wasn't I involved? Or how did you make that decision? Why did you do it that way? So that definition, again, that documentation is essential. And that there's an agreed upon and formal governing structure. So that governing structure may be, we have 3 subcommittees with a leader of each subcommittee. We have a secretary, we have a treasurer. You may not have a treasurer. You may have a leader who serves in that treasurer role. You may not have a secretary. You may have, however you choose to formalize the structure. We have 18 members from 7, from different sectors. We always make sure that all 12 sectors are represented, or the governing structure will include, a clear recruitment model, right? So that we make sure that we're following those formal agreed upon structures. And a lot of it's kind of, again, kind of this boring, dry stuff around, are we going to have a secretary or not? Are we going to have a means in which we set up and have subcommittees? Are we going to have subcommittees? And if we decide to have a subcommittee, how do we make that decision, right? So that's decision making and its governance. So we have to think about all of those things in terms of governance. I want to talk a little bit more about roles and responsibilities. There's a lot of ways to engage in coalition. This is I think of coalition in a way that it's no longer just, let's all sit around a table and have some snacks and a chat, and we'll hear what's going on, and then what's what I call a lunch club. But there are different ways that people engage in coalition. So we have our leader, right? So we've talked about that already, that leader who kind of drives things forward, helps to create some of those written documents and ensure that that foundation and those structures are being created. There's kind of your regular member, right? Someone who's there all the time, someone who's engaged, maybe a closer partner to your work than others. Sometimes you have an intermittent member, someone who can be there sometimes, but not all the time, but their input is still valuable. So we think about ways that that person, that intermittent or remote member, can continue to be engaged and continue to be able to provide support. This is where having a secretary minutes and notes that go out to the whole group are really important. So as part of our governance, we're going to have a secretary who takes notes and sends them out. It's reaching out to that member and saying, hey, we're going to talk about this. If you could make it to this meeting, it'd be really important. If you can't, can you send us some of your input or feedback on this particular topic? So there's a way to engage people who can't be there every time, right? Who can't be there every time you have a meeting, or can't be there for every consensus decision-making conversation. And then we have subcommittee members. So these are kind of everybody in these groups so far may be one of these subcommittee members. Subcommittee should have a clear role, right? So we are a subcommittee focused on data collection. The role of this subcommittee members are to work together to identify and collect the data. Is it their job to collect the data, or is it their job to identify data and data partners, right? So making sure that those subcommittee members that are engaged are doing that in a way that has a clear definition. And this may be someone who's really only involved in the subcommittee, right? So we have a person who's an expert, who comes in and sits on that subcommittee and supports it, but then maybe has to step out when data is not the main topic or focus of the coalition. And you'll see below that, there's this needed expertise, right? So someone who's a needed expert, maybe on auditing. We know we're going to have an audit coming up. We need a financial person, whatever that expertise is, that may be someone who's part of the subcommittee or the whole group, but that comes in and out of the roles. We also have kind of one-on-one participation. Often we have leaders that we want engaged, but they do not have the time. They don't have the time to intermittently be involved, much less involved for every decision and every meeting and every time we come together. So that one-on-one participant, that maybe is that the leader reaches out, communicates what's happening, gets the input and feedback of that individual, and incorporates it into the work that's being done. So That's fairly common, I think, when we're talking about high-level leaders in the community. We want them involved. It's important that they're involved and they see the mission, the vision, they see the structure, they understand why it's important, they understand what we're trying to do. But they just can't be involved at that level. So that's one of those roles that a leader is likely going to play, is really engaging those folks. You may have someone who's more like an advisor, right? So that may be your supervisor. That may be the past president, right? That may be someone who is the head of an organization in the community that runs a different coalition or has run coalitions in the past. So it's someone who might just provide advice and support to you as the leader or to the group as a whole. So not involved, not committed to the group, except for in this role of like mentor, advisor, support to the group. And like I said before, there's this needed expert. So come in, help us with getting together our W-9 or incorporating or whatever it is that we might need an expert on. Maybe it's data analysis and we bring someone in who can help us analyze and understand data and then go out. Maybe it's someone in marketing or media, all kinds of reasons why we might have a needed expert who comes in and out of either a subcommittee or the whole group. So like you can see, this isn't a supper club, this isn't a lunch group, this is really a dynamic group of people who engage in different ways. So making sure that we all understand each other's roles and the roles are clear is essential, because as someone, if I'm a regular member and I see someone coming in and out, I may be really annoyed. If we bring in an expert who's not really committed to the group as a whole for a long term, I may be irritated, right? Why are they coming in and out? Why is the mayor listed on our members, but I never see them? Well, it may be that they have that one-on-one participation. So just clarifying those relationships and those roles is really important for the group as a whole and for those individuals. Okay. Processes. I have been having conversations about processes in some other groups, not coalitions, but in some other groups I'm a part of, and really thinking a lot about what it means to have a coalition process or have group process in place formally. So coalition processes are important because it creates that consistency that we like when we're involved in a group. So it establishes the leadership structure, the responsibility. So those processes that we've just talked about need to be established, written, and agreed upon. There's the consistency, right? So the process is we are going to meet in person once a quarter. We're going to meet virtually every other month, and then we'll communicate with you regularly. We'll meet at the YMCA, and we will always make sure that we talk about these three things, and we'll send out that agenda in advance. So that's a process that people can rely on and can trust in. We also think about clear established plans for communicating information. So how are we communicating, especially if we have folks in those various roles? How are we communicating with them? We've established that plan. We've established a way. We will communicate in 3 or 4 ways. This is a conversation, right? As a leader, you're not going to come in and say, okay, so I'm going to send an email and we'll have minutes and then we'll just talk in the group. But really to say, so as part of this group, when we have this kind of information or this kind of information, what's the best way for us to share that with you? Would you like us to have a meeting with short notice? We can have a discussion if it's an urgent matter. Is it something that you want us to come together and, or you just want an email, right? So this also sometimes connects back to that, those processes. It connects back to, the structure of our roles and responsibilities and establishing shared values and decision-making. Is this a unilateral decision? I'll just let you know via email. Is everyone good with that? Or, what do people think about if it's a decision we're making this way or this kind of thing? How do you want to decide to move forward? So those are agreed upon and established. We also have an agreed upon approach to recruitment and bringing people in. Again, this is written, it's clear, it's agreed upon and reviewed, right? So again, we've been around for 15 years. We have the same approach, maybe not the best to not revisit and review that. So we do want to make sure that we're doing that. And then establish an approach to conflict management. So this may be something that you really lean on your advisor to help you figure out. You might bring some models to the group and say, you know, when we reach a conflict, when we aren't able to come to an agreement, when our goals don't align, either our individual groups, how are we going to approach that? And it can be really hard. And as the leader, it can be hard to even have the conversation about how we're going to manage that, because people never can imagine that there would be conflict. And it does happen in groups. It always happens. But if we know how it's going to be managed, if we have a plan for it and an approach, then those processes are going to be set and ready for us to address. So I just laid out a whole lot of information, and I don't see any pressing Q&A. Is there anything in the Q&A that needs to be addressed right now, or that we can wait? Okay, it looks like we're gonna probably go just straight through so we can hear Michelle's important information on our next value, or our next best practice area, which is membership. And this, oops,
No, it's not you. It's
Oh.
When I go to close out the chat, it advances. So sorry about that.
Fun. So, so membership cannot be more important. And so we're going to take a chunk of time and listen and hear from Michelle and her expertise on the importance of membership.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. So Erin has walked us through the values of best practice and structure. And now, as she said, we're going to talk about membership. The one last thing I was going to say about what we were just talking about with this last slide here, whoops, with the structure of the coalition, I think it's so important. With the agenda, I remember I had one time a school counselor say to me, like, I really have to sell it to my administrator why it's important for me to go attend this coalition meeting. So having an agenda up front, knowing what's going to happen, knowing if it's going to be beneficial for her time to be there is really important. And I think one way we can really do that is making sure that folks feel like they're needed there, right? So I'm not, as Erin said, we're not just going there to eat lunch and kind of share out on what we've all been doing lately. We're there to, they're going to say, hey, you know, Michelle, you said you were going to contact this group and we're going to ask you to report out the next time we meet. So I know that, oh, they're counting on me to be here next time, right? They're kind of, they've given me something to do. So I think it's a very important to, yeah, go ahead,
such a
Erin.
great, I was just saying, that's such a great point about how all of these best practices overlap and intertwine. It's a really great point. And I think it's important for us to remember that these don't exist in these kind of sections where it's best, now it's values, now it's membership. They all interact together. And so you're right, having an agenda can keep a member. Having
Absolutely.
those regular minutes and that communication can really keep a sector involved. So thanks for that reminder, Michelle.
Yeah, and I think we think of it as something real small, but that structure is very important. Knowing that I'm going to get those minutes, there's an agenda, I understand what's going to happen in that meeting. So kind of don't overlook those things that might seem small sometimes. Some of you I know have been in prevention, it looked like, for many, many years. So you're not at this point of starting you know, a coalition or starting that membership, but this might be some good reminders for you as well. So why, when we're thinking about membership, do we want to start with a core group? That core group that we pull together might know other people that we don't know, right? And so if I pull together a couple of people who are pretty, like if you're from a small town and you notice a couple of people that are pretty influential, maybe they're not the mayor or they're not a big figure, but when they walk in the room, people kind of hear them, right? And they value what they have to say and they will make connections. And so if you bring this core group together, you know, it's like, let's work smarter, not harder. Because if I'm going out as a leader trying to connect with everyone and get them to the table, it might take a while. But if I have that core group already, that's really going to help jumpstart our coalition. And so start with people that you already know when you're trying to create this small group. And then why a core group? So again, I kind of already talked about this a little bit, but it increased the number of contacts. So I'm not the one going out and trying to solicit all the members to the coalition. I've got this core group that I'm working with that can really invite people to the table. They've got the connections that maybe I don't. We want to make sure that we have diversity at our table. And so maybe I don't have the connections with the faith community like others do, and I want to make sure they're at the table. Maybe the teacher that I have on my core group really has some really strong connections with the youth, and we want to make sure that we have youth at the table. We want to make sure we have that diversity at our table. And so it's really going to be important to have that core group, so we make sure we have a diverse group when we're coming together with our coalition. And we want to make sure that I've seen so often with coalitions that a lot of the work lands on the leader. And I see a lot of coalition leaders burn out because of that, right? When I see them creating their work plans, the task is always the coalition leader, the coalition leader. So we want to make sure that we're spreading out those tasks about multiple individuals and agencies. So it's not just one person doing all of that, but there's a multitude of people bringing together a strong coalition. So once you've got that core group of people, then as a group, you can brainstorm that list of possible members. Erin mentioned if you've ever done any work with CADCA, they have what they would say the 12 key sectors. And you don't necessarily need to have all 12 key sectors, but it helps you think about who are the people we'd like to have at the table. And some of those sectors might be law enforcement, media, faith-based, school, business, parents, youth. Do we have, if we're serving youth, do we have them at the table? So we want to brainstorm a list of possible members. Who do you know in the community that is in law enforcement? Let's jot their names down. Who would be willing to reach out to that person? Once you've come up with that list, are we seeing some gaps? Do we feel like, boy, we really have a lot of representation from the public sectors, but maybe we don't have a lot from private sectors? Who knows some folks in the private sector that they could reach out to make sure that we really have a good representation for our group? And then we need to meet with potential members. And obviously there's very many ways that we can reach out to folks to invite them to the table, but I would really encourage as much as possible that one-on-one connection. So maybe it's the very least a Zoom call, or as we see in this picture, sitting down for a cup of coffee, right? That personal connection to really sit down and let them know this is where that mission and vision Erin was talking about is so important. Because if I had someone call me and say, hey, do you want to be part of my coalition? We're addressing underage drinking. Well, yeah, that's important to me because I have teens, and so that's important to me. But when I get to that meeting, I want to hear from them, what's your mission? What's your vision? How are you going to get there? How does my role impact those decisions, right? Why is it important for me to be there? So kind of like what's in it for me as well. So I not only want to know what this coalition is all about, but how am I going to be valued? Why is it important for me to be there? Why would you like my time there? So face-to-face is always best. You, of course, can do emails or personal letters or do a phone call. You can put flyers and posters up, all those sort of different ways to let people know who you are and what the coalition is all about. But making those personal connections is going to be very important. The benefits of a diverse membership. We want to make sure that, one, I always say, and I know you guys know this, but we want to make sure the folks that we're serving are at the table, right? So I remember sitting on coalitions where we might be addressing our smoking rates, and we would have folks that are smokers, or we'd have folks that are, if we're talking about methamphetamines was a big issue in our state at one point, someone in recovery, someone who's lost someone to that, right? Youth, if we're going to be serving youth, we want them at the table and not just being seen as a token that we can check that box to say we have youth there, but we want them, they are the eyes and ears of their community. We can assume what's happening with those young people in those schools, but they really know, right? And we want them at the table. Again, nothing for us without us. We really want to make sure they're there. It's going to broaden our knowledge if we have a diverse group of people. We need to have other people kind of pushing us outside the box and challenging us a little bit. I noticed one of the challenges someone said about being in a group and staying in it was one person kind of came in with their way was the right way, right? And sometimes we see that in coalition work where one person kind of comes in with their agenda and they see their way is the right way. Where we need to have that diverse group to help us have these honest conversations that maybe we see it that way because that's how we grew up, or we see it through this one lens because this is what I work in. But if I have other people working in different sectors that can help me see it in a different lens, that's really going to enrich that coalition and help us when we're making decisions. So of course, it balances that decision making if we have a diverse group. So when we're thinking about that, having a diverse group and who we want represented there, as it says, multiple sectors of the community. So I mentioned those 12 key sectors. I think the important thing about having sectors is you bring these sectors to a coalition meeting. So I have a law enforcement sitting at my coalition. Of course, not all, we can't get 5, 10, 20, 30 law enforcement there, but we have the one person they're representing. He goes now back to the station and relays that information back to all of the people he's working with, right? Or we have somebody there from the mayor's office, or we have somebody from the media, and they can go back and relay that information. So we want to make sure we have multiple sectors within the community. We want to make sure that the groups that when we are sitting at a table that we have diversity, right? And so in my community, there was we had a school for the deaf, and we had a gentleman that I worked with quite closely in prevention, and he had implants so he could somewhat hear, but he had an interpreter with him. And he very much helped us realize the things that we needed to keep in mind when we were working with the deaf community. And so having him there just really enriched that coalition. So if we have a large Sudanese community, Native American, we want to make sure that all of those folks are at the table and have a say in what's going on within their community. We want to make sure there's people in our coalitions that are going to have influence. And so, like I said, it might be having someone like the mayor that people listen to, but in some communities, it might just be there's just this person that everybody knows that just has a lot of influence on, what they say. People stand up and listen, they hear them. In the Native American community, it could be the elders. People really stand up and listen to that. So having those folks at the table would be so very important, right? Having people that are impacted by the issue. So I said young people, but sometimes it's parents that have been impacted by the issue. Maybe they've lost a loved one to an overdose. Having those people at the table is going to be important. Business community can be important as well. I've seen coalitions have, if they're addressing underage drinking, they might even have businesses that are selling alcohol, because they want to be on that same page that we're not trying to put you under as a business, but we want to make sure that alcohol is not getting into the hands of people that it shouldn't be. We both want to agree on that. We want to keep our youth healthy. We want to keep our youth safe, right? And so we can both agree upon that this is what we want, and we can move towards a common goal of that. When we're thinking about membership and diversity, we not all of us have the same skill set, right? So some people might not like finances. And so finding someone who that's their niche, they are good with finances. Maybe that's what they do for their job, but they're doing the coalition work because they have a passion for it. And so they can kind of help with the financial side. Some people aren't real organized. That's not their skill. So having someone on there that really can help keep things organized. Maybe they're the person that's doing the agenda, creating the minutes from the meeting, making sure that we're staying on time within our meeting, all those sort of things. Planning, we might not, not everyone's going to be a planner, but we need people on there that are going to want to be able to plan for the next event. Or if you're going to be bringing in a big training, maybe they're the ones taking the registrations, all of that, right? We need people that are motivated. We need people who maybe they can't be at every meeting, as Erin said. Maybe they're only there quarterly or every once in a while virtually, but they're motivated to make change. And so when you're doing that event, you're going to do a suicide prevention walk, they're there and they're getting the people there because they're passionate about it. people that can analyze the problems that we have going on in our community. Okay, so we have underage drink in our community, but why? You know, why is that happening in my community? What are those risk factors that are really impacting our community? And really like to analyze that data and bring it back to the group to say, this is what we found by analyzing that data, that the reason why we're seeing underage drinking in our community is because of social access. Parents and older siblings are actually providing the alcohol. It's not so much the retail access. And so people that like to analyze that and bring it back to the larger group. And active, again, not everybody is going to be at the meetings, but they might be those doers. And so it takes a diverse group of skills and a diverse group of people to come together to really make a strong coalition work. This is one of my favorite slides that I've used many times, and it's the membership shoe test. So basically, you know, it's to say, if you would look underneath your coalition table and let's say all we're seeing is these black pair of dress shoes, that's probably telling us that we don't have a very diverse group of people, right? We don't want just the people that are doing this for their job or the business people. We want all walks of life. We want representation of different ethnicities, ages, experiences. And so, you know, it's kind of a test you can do in your own coalition, and just to kind of say, you know, are we representing our community? Do we have the people that really represent our community at our table? And do they have a say in what's going on, right? And so that's a test that you can kind of take back and think about within your own coalition. So really, when we're thinking about keys to successful recruitment, kind of bringing it back all together when we're talking about membership, is we talked about how it's important to deliver that message personally, face to face. Now, I know that's not always possible, but the more we can make those personal connections, the more likely we're going to get people at the table. I've seen coalitions have 150 people on their email list, and the same 5 people show up every month. And sometimes that's okay, but sometimes it might just be because, again, the person has never really understood what their value is. No one really made that time to connect with them and help them understand why it's important for them to be there. Each member can invite new potential members, right? So once we pull in new members, you're going to see people drop off. Sometimes we've seen coalitions where they're very large and all of a sudden the numbers go way down. And it's not because people maybe don't care about the issue, they just maybe don't have the time anymore. Maybe they, you know, started a young family. So really encouraging members to continue to do that recruiting and inviting people to our meetings. Erin talked about, with that mission and vision, we want to make sure that we do have a clear description of what our coalition is about. So in that one sentence, we can tell them what our vision is. Our mission really tells them how we're going to get there. And maybe it is a one-pager, a case statement that shows them some key data points to say, this is what we have found, this is why it's an issue in our community, these are things that we want to do to address it, and this is why we'd like you to be a part of that. This is our ask, right? And so it can be very simple. We have templates for things like that, so please reach out to us if you're thinking that you would like a template for something like a case statement. We can definitely get that to you. And just like we've talked about it, but letting them know that them being part of this coalition, how it's important to your success. They want to know what you're doing, but they also want to know how they can be a piece to that pie, right? So just remember that when you're thinking about membership and building this coalition, you know, you may not always going to be there. You might maybe for what personal reasons, whatever, you may not walk away. You want to make sure that you've set up this coalition for success. And so thinking again about, how do I sustain this coalition? If I walked away tomorrow because of whatever happened to me in my life, would we be able to sustain this coalition? And by doing these best practices and really strengthening this membership and this coalition, you're going to ensure that if not only the coalition sustains, but the outcomes that you've been able to accomplish as a coalition sustains beyond our position as a coalition leader. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Erin, and she's going to talk about our 4th best practice, which is leadership. And I'm going to see if there's any questions that we need to address now, or if we can wait until the very end here.
You know, I was just looking, I don't see anything that's
Okay,
really specific to and needs to be stopped. We
Thanks,
can
Erin.
answer at the end. Wonderful. So leadership. So much of what we talked about so far with our values and our structures, with our our membership, it's the leader that sets that tone, that creates that environment and helps make sure that these things are happening. So it's about facilitating, fostering, and managing your coalition. So for those folks who've maybe been in the field a long time and maybe are in a position of leadership, or those who haven't and are being asked to step into that role, these are the pieces that you want to ensure that you're addressing, right? Is that facilitating, fostering, and managing the group. I am going to advance my slides. So one of the things you want to do is create cohesion, right? So people who say, I loved being a part of the group because I felt like I was needed, I felt like I was a part of something. It's that cohesion of bringing people together to communicate and promote this communication and transparency and how the group works that brings people together and keeps them there. So that cohesion but as the leader, you really set the tone for that happening. Resolving conflict and maintaining goodwill among all members. So not letting things sit and fester if something's said that's been taken the wrong way, or that's been upsetting or offensive, or someone who's to have really different opinions about how to address the same issue, or feel like their turf is being stepped on. Any of those things, you have to make sure that those things get addressed and not brushed under. The cohesion of the group, that can really be undermined. You can have a member leave, and if that member leaves because of conflict, what happens is people start to hear and see and think, I guess if I disagree, I'm might as well just step out. So that leadership of bringing that cohesion together is really your job in terms of managing that conflict. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Celebrating process and outcome accomplishments. So sometimes we really only think about outcome accomplishments, but our processes are so important. And understanding that, like, that process, that data collection process, that planning process, whatever it is that we've completed, should be celebrated as much as the outcomes. I've always been one that's like, oh, celebrate. But as part of a group, I do like that celebration when I'm part of the group. As a leader, it just sometimes it feels like I don't want to stop and do that. But as a part of a group, I was part of a running group that raised money for a specific disease. And one of the things that the leader of that group did regularly was every time someone got halfway to their goal, we'd like have a little like celebration for them, and it was just little and it was just helpful. When we as a group ran our first 10 miles, it was, there was this we weren't it wasn't the outcome, it wasn't the end of the half marathon, but it was a big accomplishment for us. And so those process accomplishments it was really lovely to feel celebrated throughout the process, and not just at the end. You want to develop a sense of unity and trust. And so that goes back to being transparent, to communicating, to ensuring that conflict is managed, and that unity, right? That we're all in this together. So I think we absolutely want to make sure that we're laying down these foundations of communication and trust. And going back, like, these are the values, right? This is that mission and vision. This is that how we're going to make decisions. But you're going to want to develop that sense over time, at the beginning stages of the development of a coalition, but also continually coming back to this as new members come in and out of the coalition, which is natural. And then you want to like check in with people. Is this working for you? How are our processes working? Sometimes if you have a coalition member who hasn't shown up a number of times to a number of meetings or hasn't been engaged with emails, I want to check in with them individually. The president of the board of directors of the preschool I was on came to my house to check in to make sure I was okay. I had had a medical issue, I had foot surgery, and I hadn't been coming to meetings, I hadn't been responding to anything. She just wanted to make sure I was okay as an individual, but she also wanted to make sure there wasn't anything that was keeping me away from the group process wise, or that I wasn't engaged, or I didn't have a sense of purpose, but really wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything she needed to check in with me about. So individually checking in with people, checking in with the larger group, your core group, new people, making sure that they are feeling a part of the group, that there's not anything that you need to do as a leader to build that more as you bring new people in, especially if you bring new people in. building and facilitating cohesion is essential. A culture of openness. I feel like this is something we can't say enough, and clearly we have said a number of times, which is you want to make sure that you're communicating important information and creating an open environment in which there's no room for kind of questioning people's intent or questioning the way that they are doing things, whether there's malice or intentionally leaving people or sectors or individuals out of decision making or out of regular communication. So communicating important information ensures that people understand and have that open environment. They understand what's happening and keeps people more engaged and content in the group because they know how things are happening, right? So those structures we set up early on are essential to that. And as a leader, it's your role to ensure that that culture continues, right? We don't just write it down and then forget about it. As a leader, you want to make sure that you invite everyone into conversations, right? There are those of us who are extroverts and could talk all day, and those of us who are introverts and need some time to think about a response or to engage in a conversation. So find a way to make sure you're inviting everyone into conversations and into decision making, even if they're new, if they might be shy, if they may be an introvert, making sure that you leave time for quiet, making sure that you have different approaches to doing different kinds of decision making or different kinds of approaches to meetings that might engage people in different ways. You want to make sure you have enough time so that members can process, right? So, and I kind of just talked about this a little bit with someone who may be an introvert. I have a member of a team that I'm on who has so much to offer, but really just needs time to sit with things before she can respond. And so I have to remember to not think, oh, she's really not engaged, but to think, I'm going to check back in with her in, 3 or 4 hours, see if she's had a chance to think about it. Or presenting an idea at the beginning of a meeting and say, we're going to talk about this towards the end of a meeting, presenting something and say, next week, we're going to talk about this, presenting something at the beginning, through email. So just so you know, we're going to talk about this topic. Gives people that time to ensure that they're processing it and creates that openness that I know I'm being allowed to participate in a way that works and that there's a sense of open decision making and a sense that there's a kind of an open agenda. We want to be inclusive of all members so that everyone's participating regardless. We want to make sure that however they want to participate, however they can participate, that there's this feeling that there's an opportunity for being included in all of those things. Setting up that foundation cannot be more important to this, right? If you have a foundation where you have clarified how decisions are made and when they are made and who is engaged in them, or how different people participate and what's their different roles, then all the members can understand how they're included and how they can be included. So making sure that that's clear really will help. And as a leader, that's your job to make sure that is continually communicated, right? So important. If it's not continually communicated, if it's written, decided upon, and walked away from, that's not helpful, especially as we bring in new people or people come and go or things change. You just have to remember to continually bring that foundation back to the forefront because it will help with this coalition, this culture of openness. I think it's a great idea and it works in some groups and doesn't in others, right? So to share a leadership role, the sharing of power is always it's always helpful. It creates openness, it creates understanding, and it gives people an opportunity to engage in different ways. Or dividing leadership tasks. So if it's not really an option to have people, or if people are not interested in, a leadership role as a leader, right, and taking on that meeting facilitation or meeting planning or reaching out to folks, if they're not interested in that level of leadership, maybe you divide some of the leadership tasks that may be a part of that. I think Michelle said early on, like, the role of a leader is important and it's often undervalued, and it's often not seen the sheer volume of work that coalition leaders take on. So dividing that is important. As a leader, remembering that you are not the only person in the room and you are not the only person who can do that work. So sometimes we kind of say, oh, well, nobody else has time, or, it's just easier if I do it myself. Creating that culture of openness, fostering that group continuity sometimes means sharing tasks that maybe it is easier if you do it yourself, but sharing those roles and those leadership responsibilities can be really valuable for the group dynamic. Let's see, now I'm going to go on to my next slide. You want to have and we've talked about this, it's so funny because these things just intertwine so much that we forget that, this is about leadership and membership and foundational values. So you as a leader can enhance the cohesion. You can create opportunities to participate, thinking again about those different ways that people participate in coalition. You want to make sure that they have all those opportunities and that you help them participate in those different ways, right? So if we think about asking members to assist with tasks, that's sharing leadership, that's engaging them, building cohesion and buy-in. We can seek input from all members, which is essential. Take steps to make sure that everyone is involved in discussions. That's that openness and cohesion, and ensuring that members are comfortable and confident. All the foundation that you've laid is going to bring you here. It's really unbelievable how important that foundation of those key values and structure are. Being process focused, again, this is not just in the beginning, but maintaining that process focus throughout your facilitation should ensure a common understanding, a focus on goals, long-term, short-term at the meeting for this section of the agenda, focus on your goals, whatever those may be in that moment, maintaining a productive and safe environment, and that's part of that cohesion as well. That's part of making people's time feel valued. So it's that recruitment, it's retention, it's leadership. Soliciting equal participation is part of the process, right? So that's an underlying understanding. This is the process that we use. Making sure that conflict isn't hidden. We've talked about this, and that that there's follow up, right? So if we go to a meeting and we're told something's going to happen and it doesn't, right? So I'll make sure that I send that out, but nothing happens. That can really undermine the process. So as the leader, whether you're the one who's going to do the follow-up or someone else has promised follow-up, it's important for you as that key leader to do that follow-up. And make sure it happens, right? Say, oh, I remember you said you were going to do that. There's a whole world in life. There's a whole training somewhere in the universe on managing conflict as a leader. And we don't have enough time in the world to kind of get into, well, at least today, maybe in the rest of the day even, to get to how we are going to manage potential conflict. But you want to make sure you're focused on policies, that differences in strategies and leadership are recognized, so that everybody's goals and intentions and where they're from and where the work that they're doing outside of the coalition is understood and valued. You want to make sure that new partners come in an integrated way that will help reduce the potential for conflict. There's, you're going to have to manage personalities sometimes. And as the leader, that really falls on you. So making sure that, you're checking in with people, that you're managing how much one person takes over the conversation versus another. So managing those personalities, developing roles and relationships between members, and also that cohesion of the group, but also between you as a leader and the individuals on the coalition. Funding is a place where I promise you that conflict is going to come up, whether it's the funding of the coalition, funding of the work you want to do, or the funding of other agencies and how they intertwine people. This is that turf issue, that barrier. So conflict often comes up about who's going to pay for what, who's already paying for that, and where we're going to get that funding. So making sure that you're clear and you're getting input from as many of those members, and maybe that consensus model is around funding so that there's less potential for conflict because we're having the same conversation together. So leadership is no small deal, right? It's really integrated as much as sustainability. Having good leadership, having membership that is engaged and bought in and recruited in a way that that shows their value in their role, having a structure that is reliable and documented, and having values that are shared, communicated, revisited, and written. Those are all things that sustain our work throughout. And so I just want to, just as a reminder, these are what we're looking at as our best practices, and all of them play into sustaining our work and our coalition into the future. I can't use my clicker. And just leaving with this idea that community coalitions are essential to that successful, sustainable prevention. Without them, we wouldn't have all the buy-in that we need to do the work. I know we have some questions, and I know we also have some, and I'm going to go through some of these questions just.
Erin, I'm wondering, with looking at the time, if we could go ahead and we will forward those questions to you and Michelle via email. And if you could give some written responses, then we will send that out in the follow-up email so everybody will get the answers to those questions.
Wonderful. I was just reading them and thinking, I need to think about this. So
okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to share a few ending slides here. I want to make sure you all know about some upcoming events that we have in case you are looking for some more training. We have a training coming up on November 2nd with creating welcoming spaces for LGBTQ individuals in our substance misuse prevention programs. Primary prevention, moving upstream using effective strategies. This is one I am presenting. It's going to be through NADAC. So as soon as we get the link for that, we will share that with you all through our Facebook and LinkedIn pages, and also through our weekly email. This is if you have folks who are new to prevention, maybe new coalition members, maybe some of your bosses who might be new to prevention. This would be an ideal webinar for them to attend. We have on November 30th, something for the more intermediate to advanced prevention professionals, promising prevention practices, when, why, and how to implement them. This is a 3-hour training that's going to be coming up on November 30th. If you're wanting to learn how to use the social development strategy to increase building protective factors in your community, join us on December 5th. Erin's going to do another training on continuous quality improvement for substance misuse prevention on December 12th. Registration for that's going to open soon. And we are going to start our deep dive into prevention ethics series starting in January, the first Thursday of each month. This is not an introductory course to prevention ethics, so you will need to have taken the Foundation in Prevention Ethics course before you attend this. You can do the online course, or if you've attended the in-person course. And last but not least, for at least now, January 9th, we have risk factors for substance misuse prevention. I wanted to point out on our prevention portal, you will see Coalition Basics tab right here. If you click on that tab, you will find more information about coalitions, of what is it, learn about it, and take action. We will put our webinar, once the recording's up, we will link it to this page, as well as it will be on our regular place of our product page. But if you're wanting to learn more, be sure to check this out. And if you haven't yet, be sure to like and follow us on either LinkedIn and or Facebook. This is where you'll get the latest information from us. With that, we are going to close out the training, and when you're closed out, you're going to be redirected to this feedback form. As Rebecca said at the beginning of the training, it is essential for us to get our feedback from you all so that we can improve our trainings, as well as report back to our funders so we can continue to offer these free trainings to you. With that, a huge thank you to Erin and Michelle for all of your work in pulling this together and presenting this to us. And thank you to the rest of you for participating in the training today, and also to Rebecca for the back end work that she's done on this whole webinar of getting everything set up. So thank you to you all, and I look forward to seeing you on another training.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.